On a cold night in 1933, a group of Inuit people came upon a derelict cargo ship drifting in the icy waters off the coast of northern Alaska. They decided to explore the abandoned ship to see if they could find anything of value. But almost as soon as they climbed aboard, the winds shifted and a violent storm blew in seemingly from nowhere, trapping them inside. As the Arctic winds raged outside, what once felt like a refuge from the storm turned into a nightmare as the small group huddled in a derelict cabin, listening to the ghostly groans of the ship grinding in the shifting ice. When the storm finally cleared 10 days later, the small group fled. The phantom ship, named the Baychimo, would soon vanish. She would mysteriously reappear numerous times all over the Beaufort Sea for over 30 years. The SS Baychimo was launched in Sweden in 1914. Her original name was Angermanelfen, after the Swedish river. Her first owners were German, and she was used as a trading vessel between Hamburg and Sweden throughout the First World War. She was relatively modest in size, weighing in at just 1,322 tons, with a length of 230 feet. She was powered by a triple expansion engine that could achieve 10 knots. After the war, she was handed over to the British as a war reparation in 1920. She left the Baltic Sea and for the first time was purchased in London by the Hudson Bay Company for £15,000. She was renamed the Baychimo. Her first voyage with the company took place in 1921 in the Eastern Arctic. The next year, she was sent to Siberia with her new captain, Sidney Cornwell. He would remain her captain for the rest of her career. The Baychimo would spend the next 2 years trading furs in Siberia, but political tensions soon led the Hudson Bay Company to withdraw from the area. After 1921, she would begin operating in the Western Arctic, traveling between Vancouver and Hudson Bay Company posts along the Yukon and Northern Territories. She completed 9 voyages carrying cargo and furs. She typically had 32 crew members and would occasionally carry passengers. Every winter, she would travel back to her home port in Ardross in Scotland. She would return to Canada through the Panama Canal, and in 1924, she would also travel through the Suez Canal, successfully circumnavigating the globe. The Baychimo experienced particularly treacherous weather conditions in her 1931 season, frequently finding herself mired in fog and heavy ice throughout the summer. In late September, as she passed the Seahorse Islands near Point Barrow, Alaska, the Baychimo encountered an unexpected blizzard. Her crew was forced to drop anchor to weather out the storm. By October 1st, conditions continued to deteriorate, and the steamship was soon trapped in pack ice. Recognizing the dire situation, the crew abandoned the vessel and traveled half a mile through the ice to the town of Barrow, where they would shelter for 2 days. But when they returned, the stricken vessel had broken free from the ice. It was clear that it would be impossible to safely sail the ship further southwest, and the crew would have to watch over her throughout the winter. The situation grew even worse when on October 8th, the ship once again became mired in ice, this time much more thoroughly than before. On the 15th, the Hudson Bay Company sent an aircraft to retrieve the crew, but Captain Cornwall and 14 of his men refused to leave their ship behind. The company provided them with provisions to last through the winter, and they constructed a crude temporary shelter nearby. They wouldn't dare live aboard. It was impossible to keep the ship heated, and the shifting ice threatened to crush her at any moment. They spent their time performing daily maintenance on the ship, mainly clearing ice from her rudder to prevent any damage. Then on November 24th, a blinding storm struck the area. When it finally cleared, the Baychimo was nowhere to be seen. Captain Cornwall and the crew assumed the powerful storm had overtaken the ship, finally breaking her up and sending her to the bottom. But to their surprise, an Inuit seal hunter spotted the derelict vessel only a few days later, trapped in ice near Skull Cliff, some 45 miles away. Captain Cornwall and his crew tracked her down and concluded that the ship was too badly damaged to safely survive the winter. They removed the remaining cargo and abandoned their ship for the final time, knowing that she would soon break up in the brutal icy waters of the Beaufort Sea. Captain Cornwall and his remaining crew were flown back to Vancouver. The SS Baychimo was officially deemed a loss, and the men went on with their lives. But later that winter, the Baychimo was spotted 300 miles east of where she was abandoned. This kicked off a long string of mysterious appearances by the ghostly ship. She was next spotted by a man named Leslie Melvin. He was traveling to Nome with his dog sled team when he came across the ship floating peacefully near the shore. A few months later, she was again discovered by a group of prospectors. At first, the sightings were an odd surprise, but nothing too extraordinary. The area was, and still is, extremely treacherous. It wasn't uncommon for ships to be overtaken by the ice and abandoned by their crews. Typically, once a ship was abandoned, she would succumb to the elements in a few days or weeks. But occasionally, one of these ships would survive for a season or two, before finally foundering in the ice. So when the Baychimo appeared in the distance again and again over the next several months, locals didn't think much of it. But as time went on and the derelict ship kept appearing, stories began to circulate that something supernatural was guiding the phantom ship. Those who spotted her claimed that it appeared that she was being piloted by some unseen crew as she drifted away from rocky shoals and other hazards that would challenge even vessels manned by skilled navigators. In 1933, her legend grew when a group of Inuit people were forced to shelter on the ghost ship when a freak storm trapped them in her hull for 10 days. These strange encounters helped earn the Baychimo a reputation as a cursed ship. Later that summer, she was boarded by the crew and passengers of the Trader, a small schooner that was on a research expedition to collect Alaskan and Arctic wildflowers. Soon after they finished exploring the ship, she disappeared in the night. But throughout the remainder of their voyage, the Baychimo would appear several more times, seeming to follow them. In November 1939, there was an attempt to salvage her by Captain Hudson, but his vessel was ill-equipped to safely take control of the larger Baychimo. This was the last officially recorded boarding of the ship. She was spotted several more times throughout 1939, but she always seemed to elude capture. Recorded sightings slowed considerably during World War II and the years after. It was assumed that she finally succumbed to her long overdue fate, and she was more or less forgotten. But then, miraculously, she was spotted by a group of Inuit people in March 1962, floating near the shore along the Beaufort Sea. Her last recorded sighting took place in 1969, when she was seen drifting in heavy pack ice, 38 years after she was originally left for dead. Though she hasn't been seen in decades, her mystery continues. Her unnatural ability to remain afloat unmanned in one of the most treacherous bodies of water continues to baffle investigators. In 2006, the Alaskan government commissioned a project to solve her mystery, but to date, nothing has been found. The sightings we know about are only the ones that were recorded to history. How many others managed to explore the phantom ship? What did they find when they explored her empty cabins or ventured deep into her cargo holds? Was there something supernatural that guided her? How did she survive so long? And did she finally sink? Or is she still out there, drifting in some far-off, forgotten stretch of the Arctic, waiting to be found once again?